Dyer of Jay's Analysis. Dyer of Jay's Analysis. Dyer of Jay's Analysis. Dyer of Jay's Analysis. All right, welcome, all you Jay's Analysis nerds. Can you hear me? Are we good on audio? Y'all ready to do this? Y'all ready to do this thing? Get that Goldfinger going. All right. I can be heard. So yeah, I thought it would be interesting to revisit Bond, and because we haven't talked about Bond in a while. Of course, it was a big part of the first Esoteric Hollywood. And even though Esoteric Hollywood 2 will be talking about espionage, I don't think we cover any Bond stuff in Esoteric Hollywood 2. So, while I was reading Wim Hof's book, I was struck by how well it ties into Cold War secrets and the power of propaganda. So we're going to be talking about all that. Hopefully I can answer some Cold War questions if you guys have any. Thank you to Jolene for already kicking off the super chats there, $4.99. Thank you, Jay, from Russia, from A Russian with Love. Well, we love you too, Jolene. And we welcome those tasty vodka super chats from Putin himself, who is my master, Lord, and Savior. If you read the internet gossip, I'm a Putin stooge, KGB shill. So that's why Bond is perfect to do. We will be doing the Bond because Jay is KGB shill, direct from Mind Control Operation Agent 113 Dugan Handler. Dugin get order from Putin. Putin send order to Dugin. Dugin send order to J. J do mission. J get on RT as reward for Russian mission. Payment come in giant crate of vodka. I'm also CIA too, and Jewish shill all at once. I am the greatest spy operative that has ever lived because I am a member of every. I'm like a quintuple agent. I'm a member of every possible agency all at once. So it was fun to review these Bond films. I figured we'd have a bigger audience here. Where's all the Bonders? Nobody likes James Bond anymore. Is it too sexist? We got to get a lesbian Eskimo to play the next Bond. Is that how it's going to be? Is that the only way to be PC with James Bond? And of course, if you read my book, you know the esoteric, the alchemical elements in Bond, right? The name Bond itself, right? We covered all that in Esoteric Hollywood 1. If you don't have the book, be sure to get your copy of Esoteric Hollywood 1, signed copies at Jay's Analysis. The link's below in the description at the Jay's Analysis shop. Now, we were talking about, we want to get into the plot of Dr. No. Let's see if I can pull up a little bit of imagery here. Now, did you know that the first Bond film, Aristotle Onassis himself offered to fund the first Bond film? Why, yes, he did. Not many people know that. I think if you read my book, you'd know that. I think we talk about that in the book. I think. But Dr. No, who represents World War II and Cold War threats simultaneously. He is a, what is he, half Chinese, half German, I think is what he's supposed to be. So you'll see he wears his sort of pseudo-commie garb there, his Blofeld-style dress, the same style of dress that we see Kim Jong wearing still. This is still worn by every. This is dictator chic, bro. Dictator chic. And also, if you are a Beatle or you're in Oasis, you can wear this outfit. This it's like a Hindu type. It's like a what Indians wear, but also then when it gets pockets, this little outfit here, when it gets the pockets, it becomes the immediate dictator garb. And yes, the dictators literally do wear this because they're like out of Bond movie, because reality is almost a Bond movie, as we'll see, right? Let's see. I was looking for Kim Jong and the Blofeld. That's a funny picture. I think it's a meme. Yeah, here it is. You see he's literally dressed like Blofeld. Somebody even made him. I think I put this in my book too, this funny meme, because he acts like Blofeld. All right, here's Kim Jong and his dictator chic. See, told you. So the real world is a Bond movie. Come on now, if I make you laugh. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Lawrence Balanog. What is the worst Roger Moore Bond movie? I don't know. Octopussy or I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, Live and Let Die has inflatable black guys that pop and he runs on the heads of alligators. That's pretty bad. But Live and Let Die is also pretty funny. So, yeah, hard to say there. Good question, though. Thank you, Mr. B. But now Dr. No kicks off Cold War in terms of Bond films. I mean, obviously Cold War is kicked off in the 40s, but towards the end of the 40s, 49, 47, 48, 49. But Dr. No is 1962, and the plot, of course, has Spectre is introduced as the new criminal cartel. Now, this is worth mentioning because Spectre is the international terror threat. Now, we're going to have SMERSH mentioned. SMERSH will come up in the early Bond films, and we have to mention that because SMERSH is going to be present as the counterintelligence operation in From Russia with Love. But SMERSH is based on Soviet counterintelligence. And SMERSH was real. So when Ian Fleming was writing that, he based SMERSH on the real SMERSH. And SMERSH will evolve into Spectre, as you can see. SMERSH was an umbrella organization for Soviet counterintelligence, the Red Army, in the late 40s and even earlier, officially announced in 1943. It was coined by Stalin, and it is, as we said, KGB counterintelligence. The organization officially in existence in 1946 when its duties were transferred back to the MGB. The agency throughout its existence was Viktor Abakurov, who rose to become a Minister of State Security in post-war years. SMERSH, Department of the NKVD. Now, Fleming puts this into the first novel, Casino Royale, but the first Bond film is Dr. No. So it gets a little confusing at times, but the reason we mention this is because SMERSH will evolve from SMERSH to International Terror Organization Spectre. Now, this is fascinating because that's really what happens. The real New World Order, the Illuminati, so to speak, are Spectre, but they're not Soviet KGB terrorists. And in fact, when we get to From Russia with Love, we're actually going to see that we're going to be shown by Ian Fleming that Spectre, the International Illuminati organization, is not national. It's transnational. Now, there's going to be a little bit of projection there and a little bit of deflection and disinfo because, as you know, Western intelligence is what runs the terror organizations. It's going to be deflected, though, in the Bond stories to this unknown, unseeable, mysterious international organization of terrorists. Now, the reason we bring that up, again, is because the RAND Corporation, quite literally, during this period was transitioning from the Cold War. They were studying counterinsurgency to prepare for the war on terror. Now, Ian Fleming himself is preparing us, and you can debate to what degree he knew. I think he knew. I think he did know. He was in the companies of the Western elite, Royal Society, and so forth. So I think he knew where the Atlantis' power block intended to take the world, which was into the amorphous global war on terror. So you couldn't move, though, to the trans-nation state, trans-regional war on terror until you had dealt with the dialectical regional power block battle of the Cold War. So this is very important, though. So you see that it transitions out of the Western powers versus the Eurasian communist powers into the international war on terror. And if we're going to fight an international war, why, I guess we need international bodies to fight it, don't we? Right? The UN, blah, 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 globalists, globalism, blah, blah, blah. And guess what? The globalists run the anti-globalists. Well, insofar as the global crime syndicates, which we are told is the reason for the globalist power structures to exist, they're in league with the globalists. The global criminals are in league with the globalists because the globalists are global criminals. They run the mafia organizations. Right? This is discussed in what? In the CIA Complicity and Drug Trade book, which eventually we will get to. It's a very long book, so I have not completed it yet. I have read chapters out of it, though. We will eventually get to the famous McCoy book, Politics of Heroin, CIA Complicity in the Global Drug Trade. Guess what? It's not run by the KGB. And it's not the KGB disinformation tactics that are running things. It's the Fortune 100, all aided by the CIA. That's who runs the show. We got a couple super chats before I continue. Jacob KB, $5. Jay, I believe you are to occult and esoteric teachings as Joseph Campbell was to Eastern philosophy. Love your work. Keep it up. Well, that's an interesting comparison. I never thought about that, but thank you there, Jacob. I appreciate it, and we'll take that to heart. Campbell is an interesting guy. He popularized Carl Jung. So I guess you could say in a way I popularized certain ideas through film analysis. So thank you. I'll take it. Although, however, I do critique Gnosticism and Jungian archetypes. So not exactly the same as Joseph Campbell. But Nick Frierson, £5, the legalization of homosexuality killed Bond. Well, I guess we'll see, because yeah, if you read Bond criticism and literary theory, which I did in grad school, the feminists love it. They go crazy over it because of all of its misogyny. Evil misogyny. Oh, so bad. Anyway, so if we know the plot, we know that Bond is sent on his first mission here in the story to where but the Keys, Crab Key. He's down in Bahamas or somewhere. And he learns of the organization Spectre, which stands for Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Extortion. This is a great name for an organization. In fact, I wouldn't mind having a Spectre ring. I mean, what is it? It's an octopus. So just a cool ass looking ring, you have to admit. Where do you get your Illuminati rings? Well, I ordered it from illuminatiring.com, and it came in the mail, and it's a Spectre ring. And it's a global octopus because the real global power structure is a global octopus. There are even books about the global power structure called The Octopus, Daniel Estelin's book. And that's appropriate. What's the logo of naval? What's the patch? Is it the ONI? Or one of the military black op patches is an octopus. Is it naval intelligence? Is it one of them? I can't remember. Naval intelligence. Let's see. Is it naval intelligence? Having a hard time finding it. No, that's it. Naval research. Yeah. Surprise, surprise. What's the patch for the NRO? Well, it's an octopus. There you go. Why is that? Well, because the real power structure is naval intelligence. Just like Ian Fleming himself, who was high-level black ops naval intelligence. And that's why he wrote the Bond stories. And that's why Commander Bond, played by Sean Connery, is from the Navy. Why, didn't you know I'm from the Navy? Yes, because the sea power, if you're a sea power nation, like England, like the Atlantis is power, then you are a naval power. So where's your real eyes and ears and power structure? Well, it's not the Army. Certainly not the British Army. It was the British Imperial Navy. And guess what? Where's America's power? Well, it's policing the seas, isn't it? It's the Navy. So, by the way, if you doubt me on that, what's the naval intelligence patch? Well, it's an all-seeing eye. Surprise, surprise. Yes. Serve our satanic elite or else. Octopus, all-seeing eye. Oh, it's just happenstance. Doesn't have any meaning. You're a crazy conspiracy theorist, even though it's all true in public. You're crazy. So, yeah, I mean, the plot's pretty clear. There's not a whole lot to dig into, except that, if I recall, Fleming did go and do research. Well, he had like his house in the Bahamas, I think, that he went to every 3 months out of the year to write Bond stories. And so that's part of the reason why he stuck some of the stories there. But basically, Dr. No is the archetypal sort of villain here. And he's revealed to be a member of the Chinese crime gang, the Tongs. Now, Tongs are real. They are kind of like triads. And the Tongs will come up in Thunderball. I think Tongs are mentioned in Thunderball at the beginning. And that's because Count Lippe, who is a member of Spectre, is also a member of the Tong organization. So Spectre, we are told, we're getting the impression here that Spectre, this amorphous international Illuminati criminal crime terror syndicate, works with the Asian mafia and communists, you see. So Cold War dialectics, in other words, as if, by the way, who trained Mao's guerrillas? Well, it was the CIA. Didn't you know? Of course it was. Public knowledge, publicly declassified at the CIA's website. Wild Bill Donovan and the CIA OSS trained Mao's guerrillas. So guess what? The real Spectre is British intelligence and the CIA, who work with crime syndicates. It's not the over-exaggerated power and influence of the KGB, right? Remember, this is what's going on here. So this is called deflection. This is why Bond is a psyop. Bond is itself Cold War propaganda. Now, let's see what else should be mentioned here in the Dr. No plot. Well, of course, Dr. No, what he has a front, which is interesting because he's selling bat guano, bat shit, as a front for his underground fortress, which has a stolen rocket, I think is the plot, right? Yeah, he's going to try to disrupt the Project Mercury at Cape Canaveral space program with his radio beam. And Dr. No's control center has a nuclear pool reactor. It's reactors under the pool. Because, it's underground, right? Or it's underwater. His whole base is underwater. And Bond and the Navy, Royal Navy, saved the day. Okay, so again, this is a fairly simple plot. Not a whole lot of depth going on here. We're going to see a little more, well, actually quite a bit more depth in From Russia with Love. A lot more illustrative and instructive. But we have the stage set, right? So Bond, of course, destroys Dr. No, and this is going to lead to the raising the vengeful ire of Spectre. They've got it out for Bond now. Got to take out this damned James Bond, and we are committed to that. So let's see, what was I was looking for? Now again, this is all going to be tied into the first chunk of Wim Hof's book. And we get a lot of funny interesting elements introduced from Russia with Love, which is a lot more, it has a lot more depth, a lot more insight, a lot more revelation of the method going on in From Russia with Love than the terribly simplistic plot of Dr. No. So let's move on to that. Now, here things get explicitly Cold War, more so than they were in the amorphous figure of Dr. No. Now, definitely, we got to fight the dangerous Russians. Now, you might think that the film would tell us that it's the Russians that are the bad guy, but now wait a minute. Do we all remember the famous scene with number one on his yacht? What does number one tell Rosa Klebb, our lesbian KGB colonel, handler, by the way, she's a mind control handler for sex operative Tatiana Romanova that you see here. By the way, Bond is a sex operative too, right? So he's a raven. Male sex operatives in intelligence are called ravens. Females are called swallows, right? If you saw Red Sparrow with J-Law, you learned this. But let's keep in mind that from the outset, the lie of the Cold War, which is that the NKVD, the Russians were the only people who used sex operatives, is already shown to be false in Western cinema. Bond is a raven. He's a sex operative as well as an assassin. The character of Cary Grant in Notorious is also a raven. He seduces the Ingrid Bergman character. So Hitchcock, by the way, the girl in North by Northwest is also a raven. I mean, a swallow, excuse me. Sex operative. So we're being told more about reality in these films than we are in mainstream garbage. I'm having a hard time pulling up images. Here we go. Trying to get some good images for this movie. So, there we go. From Russia with Love is 1963. Follows on the big hit of Dr. No. And it begins with this chess match. Now, this is interesting because I'm pretty sure Garry Kasparov is a CIA asset, right? He is a rabid anti-Putin character. I think he's been spirited out of Russia before. He's always talking about... Now, I mean, I'm not saying that the movie is Garry Kasparov because the movie's in the 60s, but this guy, you know, kind of plays this Garry Kasparov role. Kronstein, who is a Spectre operative. And he's got this plan, this elaborate plan to lure 007 into a sex plot with Tatiana. This will cause Bond to help steal a Soviet cryptographic decoder device called the Lecter. When Bond steals the Lecter, Spectre, who is really behind the plot and not the Russians, the international organization playing the Brits off against the Russians and the Russians off against the Brits in the West, this plot will allow the device to be stolen by Bond. Spectre will then steal the device from Bond. And it will appear as if James Bond stole the Lecter device, and the Soviets will blame the West, and the West will be forced into a Cold War conflict. In other words, the Cold War is a dialectic that is fostered by a higher level international secret society. Exactly. Well, that's what we've been telling you for a long time, isn't it? Of course it is. And Spectre is an international organization that uses people from the West and the East. The assassin, the big, tall Irish dude, right? He's Irish. Rosa Klebb is Russian. We don't know the origin of number one. He only talks and pets the cat. Observe the beta fish. It sits back and it waits while the other fish kill each other, and after they fight, he comes in for his meal. Well, that's what Spectre's doing, right? Making the East and the West fight against one another, and when they've fought each other to the death, Spectre steps in to take the victory. Well, that's what the Atlanticist power block did throughout the 20th century. That's what I've been lecturing on from Tragedy and Hope. And that's what Spectre says they're up to. Again, From Russia with Love is very insightful in terms of Cold War dialectics and large-scale geopolitics. Number one, sitting on his yacht like Soros, literally says what he's up to. Let the nation states fight one another in a global chess match, the grand chessboard. Brzezinski, that's how the movie starts, with a chess game, with Kronstein, again, like some sort of Kasparov character. So we see then that the organization is able to dupe both the Soviets and the West because they have agents in the West and in the Soviet power structure. If you listen to the interview that I did with Mark Hackard, you'll see that that's exactly what was discovered. Both Soviet and Western people learned that there was a higher level international globalist billionaire power structure that was funding and aiding both sides to have this conflict. Now, what's fascinating is that a lot of the film takes place in Turkey, in Istanbul. Now, Istanbul has been a long time stage for espionage operations. If you go to Espionage History Archive, you will find some fascinating articles that Mark has translated over the years, as well as Nina, dealing with the history of espionage in the Cold War. Espionage History Archive. You'll find articles about the NKVD, but again, places like Italy, Rome, and Turkey were hotbeds of Cold War espionage activity. It's places where spies would meet and spies would follow spies. This is even lampooned in the movie. Spies would hang out with other spies, chit-chat, and it was like a known thing, right? Now, Rosa Klebb is, again, this is interesting because she is this creeper lesbian, and she was formerly head of SMERS, but she's been secretly recruited into Spectre, right? The Illuminati for all intents and purposes. But she retains her role as mole and operative within the KGB structure. She is the mind control handler for Tatiana Romanova, the swallow sex operative. And she even makes this clear in the beginning of the film when she has her little sort of BDSM whip type scene where we see clearly what she's all about. Bond's connect here is the Western intelligence operative Kerim Bey, who I would say is a Mason. I mean, it's not immediately made clear, but it's kind of hinted that he's a Freemason. He knows about the secret underground tunnels underneath Istanbul, and this is how he spies, by the way, on the Soviets and the Soviet embassy. Now, Kerim Bey has 10 sons, so he's a Muslim working with Western intelligence. Multiple wives, I think, that we're given that image. And the fascinating element of this part of the film is the fact that a bomb goes off that is believed to be the Russians, and a bomb goes off later that's planted at the Soviet embassy. But really, the first bomb, if I recall, it's Spectre that sets off this bomb. And this is also part of the higher level PSYOPs. Because Bond and Kerim Bey have not figured out that this organization Spectre is actually behind this stuff. Bond, however, eventually does figure this out. He figures out that Tatiana is being used, and she doesn't know that there's a higher level game at play with Spectre. She thinks she's just serving her Soviet country, but eventually she wants to defect because lovemaking to 007 is so potent, right? I mean, Bond is able to even turn Pussy Galore, the lesbian, straight. That's how potent Bond is. Now, it's just fascinating, too, that we have spies meeting up in Istanbul at Hagia Sophia. So there's exchanges and espionage work going on at Hagia Sophia. Not sure what to make of that, but again, it's just an interesting setting, right? What is Hagia Sophia? Well, it's the largest Orthodox church in the world before it became a mosque. Formerly Constantine's church, right? Constantinople. Now, another interesting element that comes in is that Karen Bey utilizes networks of gypsies to spy. That is real. There are, in the history of espionage, there have been countless cases of Western intelligence utilizing gypsies. Why? Well, think about it. If a gypsy is a fortune teller, gypsies learn a lot of information, don't they? Well, fortune tellers make perfect spies. It's a great spy network to have. Thieves, they're also thieves too, so they also make great spy networks. If you have questions, by the way, we'll be taking those in Super Chats. Thank you to the Super Chats that have come in so far. Appreciate that. But I want to mention, too, this weird element that's thrown in, which is that in one scene, we see a giant Bob Hope poster. Now, certain women have alleged, Bryce Taylor, I think, alleges that Bob Hope was her MK Ultra handler. I don't know if that's true. I wouldn't be surprised. I think the USO certainly was used by the CIA and was connected to MK Ultra. In fact, that comes up, as we saw in the John Mark's book, I think it's mentioned there, and it also came up in the Walter Boert book that we just did a talk on. Again, the famous story of Candy Jones. She was a courier, and she was under USO cover. And of course, who ran the USO? Well, Bob Hope. So, and Ken and me, true free thinker, has dug up a Bob Hope movie. Forget the name of it, but you can find his clip where Bob Hope even appears to use mind control. Now it's, you know, comedy, ha ha ha, but he does appear to be suspect in that regard. I would not be surprised if Bob Hope was not a sex kitten handler. Now you say that's far-fetched, that's crazy. No, no, no. The movie itself that we're watching has sex operatives and handlers. Tatiana Romanova, her handler is Rosa Klebb, the lesbian. Right? Bond's handler is M. They're both sex operatives. We forget this. So is it surprising that the movie curiously shows a giant Bob Hope poster? I would say it's plausible. By the way, Bond seems to have like this has a car phone, which is interesting. This early. He's got a car phone, like a rotary dial car phone, which is interesting. Funny. The Bob Hope movie is called Call Me Buana, which I have not seen. So it has Anita Ekberg in it with Bob Hope. So if anybody has seen that movie, it might be instructive. It might be a mind control movie. I don't know. But the blackmail element is also present here because they have filmed Bond sleeping with Tatiana. And this is intended to be used as blackmail material. It doesn't work. Of course, Bond doesn't care. Bond gets a lot of booty. Let's see. Bond foils the plot, of course. Now, there's an interesting scene after the famous train sequence where they exit the train, and they are running through the hills. I guess they're in France. Hills of France. And Spectre sends a helicopter to attack. And you have Sean Connery running with his briefcase and his goofy hat through the fields with a helicopter attacking him and shooting at him. And this is almost just like the scene in Last Crusade where Henry is running through the field and he uses his umbrella to send birds into the propellers of the planes attacking him. I just thought that was interesting. It's like, did Spielberg just basically lift that scene from Russia with Love? I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, the other Bond movie, what's the MGM one? The MGM Bond, the one that's the non-canonical weird Bond. Not Diamonds Are Forever. I always forget this one. Well, anyway, you know what I'm talking about. The weird Bond one. It has Sean Connery, but it's not... it's one of the other studios that did it. It has sequences that are just like Temple of Doom. No, it's not Timothy Dalton. Let's see. It's like 83. Never Say Never Again. That's it. Right. So Never Say Never Again has these bizarre sequences that are just like Temple of Doom. There's a bunch of them. And let's see what. It's the weird one. It's the one that's non-canonical supposedly because it was a different studio. And of course, IMDb is not going to tell me what studio made it, but let's see here. Never Say Never Again is the weird one. It's based on Thunderball. It's a remake of Thunderball. It was not an Eon Productions film, so it's a weird one. Who was it produced by? Talia Films, some weird company. It still made a lot of money though, so it was still a big hit. But it's one of the weird, kind of out of place Bond films. Never Say Never Again. Anyway, there's a bunch of sequences in it that are just like Temple of Doom. It's funny if you watch it. That's way off course, but of course, Bond by the end of From Russia with Love, Bond ends up in Italy, which is spy land essentially. Italy. Just like Turkey. So we have, again, kicking off of the Cold War. And what's the takeaway? The takeaway is, again, the big insight that Spectre likes to sit back and watch and play nations off against one another. And the entity that is really behind this is not Russians. It's Western Atlanticist power block, which has the upper hand in most of the globe. And they're projecting it onto the phony made-up threat of terror, which is run by Western intelligence. That's the secret here. Just like in G.I. Joe and Cobra, right? The real bad guys are G.I. Joe, not Cobra. Or Cobra is run by G.I. Joe. That's another way to look at it. Spectre is James Bond. That's how you look at it. Right? We've talked about this before. But why do we say all this? Well, we say all this to make the point about when we get to Wemhoff's book, we're going to see that that's the reality here. I'm not the only person who's noticed this. I'm not the only analyst who's come to this realization. Many others have, right? And it's not people who are interested in defending communism. Okay, David Wemhoff's not a communist. Anthony Sutton was not a communist, right? E. Michael Jones, not a communist. A lot of people have realized that if you just stop and think about the fact that the entire Cold War was masterminded by a bunch of neocons at the Rand Corporation, maybe the same people who lied about the Cold War are the people who lied about 9/11, because it just happens to be the same crew. Are you starting to figure this out? Maybe that's who's lying about things. Okay. Now we get to an interesting tale. Goldfinger. 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 Wow, wow, wow. He's the man with the Midas touch. Such a cold finger. Wow, wow, wow. 1963. So they were churning these out because they were making freaking money. Now, Goldfinger is fun, but still not up to par. Not as good as... it's insightful. It's fun. Not as insightful as From Russia with Love, though. That was really insightful. If you recall, of course, Goldfinger's plot is, we think, to rob Fort Knox. Yeah. Robbing Fort Knox. Now, Goldfinger is... Let's see here. I gotta trying to find a good image here to put up. We'll put up the girl, the alchemically bonded gold girl here. The scene that everybody remembers. Goldfinger goldenizes his hoe when she turns on him for Bond, right? Because every chick turns to Bond. He just has that Mac power to the nth degree. Now, Goldfinger, we figure out, is a big level crime syndicate player. And he has a plot to steal money from a reserve fort. And it almost starts to sound like fiat currency, doesn't it? But what's interesting is that he's hanging out in Miami. Now, in 1960s Miami, Goldfinger's hanging out running scam. He's represents the mafia. And we know this because later on in the film, at his Kentucky Colonel Sanders estate, quite literally, he arranges for all of the mobsters in America to meet up because he owes them all $1 million. And he says, I've got a better plan. Instead of $1 million, we're going to rob Fort Knox, and I'm going to give you all, what does he say, $10 million a piece? Of course, all the mobsters are on board. Now, so Bond catches on to this whole plot here, and he realizes that Auric Goldfinger, again, Auric, right, gold, alchemy, is up to no good, and so Bond goes back and relays the information to British intelligence. Now, this is fascinating. What does British intelligence do? They arrange a meeting between Bond and the Bank of England. Yes, the Bank of England. Now, you see why I was tweeting out yesterday what I was tweeting out. If you followed me on Twitter, you saw me mentioning the gold reserves in the secret vaults of the Bank of England. Now, this is publicly in The Independent. It's not a conspiracy site. Nothing to do with conspiracies. A fifth of the world's gold is hidden in the secret vaults under the Bank of England. Quigley talked about it. We talked about this. Do you remember? In the Quigley lectures. Yes, I covered it. You're going to see why this is relevant here in a minute. It's going to blow your mind. Gold hidden under the secret vaults, Bank of England, is worth $248 billion. And there is the Queen and her BFS with Rothschild there. As I tweeted out, of course, we know, inspecting her stash, inspecting the loot. Now, in the movie, this is fascinating. the Bank of England guy tells Bond that there's a scam that Goldfinger's running with Nazi gold. And he shows Bond a bar of Nazi gold. And of course, there's 1,000 million conspiracy theory books about what happened to the lost Nazi gold. Now, I don't know what happened to it. There's a million books on this. However, look at that stash there. I bet it's there. What do you think? I bet that's where all that Nazi gold went. Right there in front of your face where you see it. By the way, we talked about all this in Quigley when we did the Quigley lectures. And this whole scam after World War II set up the Bretton Woods system and the Bank for International Settlements. Now the BIS, the International Central Bank of Central Banks, covered at length in the Quigley talks. This is central to understanding the New World Order and how the world works. If you don't understand this, you don't know anything. But if you listen to the Quigley talks, you know all this, right? Where is it? It's in Switzerland, isn't it? Well, yeah, of course it is. Where does Bond go tracking Goldfinger? Switzerland. He immediately goes to Switzerland, where Auric Goldfinger has a giant compound, which is a front, and the security guard is a granny who has a machine gun. If you remember that part, it's pretty humorous. And so we're not told in so many words exactly what's going on here, but if we just kind of think loosely about the plot of Goldfinger, we have an international cartel which is involved somehow in stealing Nazi gold. The Bank of England is sending their agent, James Bond, to save the Bank of England and the world gold markets from this deeper plot that we later discover is not about stealing Fort Knox. It's about crashing the economy. Remember what Goldfinger's plot is? It's to blow up Fort Knox, because since Goldfinger has a huge chunk of the world's gold as his own possession, if he destroys a large portion of the world's gold and makes it radioactive for 50 years, his gold stocks and holdings will skyrocket. He will have a controlling share of the global gold market. Guess what? It's not Goldfinger that has that plot. Look who has that plot. This is why gold standard is a complex issue, and it's not necessarily going to fix things just to hop back onto some gold standard, right? I'm not saying the fiat financial system is good either. It's layers and layers of scams. But when you understand that the value of gold is also a controlled market, then you start to understand why, well, if we just hopped on a gold standard, look who would run the global currency. The same people that run it now. Okay, so if you're not familiar with all this, go listen to my Quigley talk on, let's see if I can pull it up here, Bank for International Settlements. This is the creation of the bankers to run the global economy after World War II. 100% real, 100% easily verifiable. Public lectures on it. 99.9% of people don't know about it. Let's see if we can pull it up, so you know which one I'm talking about. Let's see. It's Tragedy and Hope, Lecture 2 by yours truly. The bank, I called it, the lecture is called, oh, these stupid ads. It's called the Golden Bank for International Shakedowns. All right, this is my second Tragedy and Hope lecture, because Quigley covers this at length. There it is. Only 6,700 people have watched this. Shame, shame, shame. What's wrong with you people? Do you really want to know how the world works or not? Well, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to tell you. Nobody else is doing this. Giant lectures on giant books. And I'm using movies to show you that it's in the movies too. So anyway, Basically, Bond is an agent of the Bank of England. Exactly. And what's the Bank of England? Well, it's the Bank of Rothschild, we could say. And yes, the Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland, I'm sure, has something to do with stealing the Nazi gold. And that's probably the Nazi gold right there with that woman looking at it. I mean, I have no idea. I'm just like saying, well, that's probably it. Of course, the Bank for International Settlements, as we said, is in Basel, Switzerland. So then, of course, we get the typical, Blofeld style stuff with he's going to cut Bond's nuts off with a laser. I'm going to laser your nuts, bro. He's going to hit Bond in Bond's gold member. And Bond figures out, of course, that, as we said, Operation Grand Slam is not to steal the gold, but in fact to destroy it. Now, there's a funny thing, too, with this, I guess, this product placement, because Goldfinger, his estate in Kentucky, is a Colonel Sanders-style southern plantation type thing. And as I was watching the film, I was thinking, this is like Colonel Sanders, Kentucky type stuff. Well, then the transition scene goes to a billboard of Colonel Sanders. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'm thinking right here because they're showing Colonel Sanders in the movie. Now, as we said, he gathers all of the world's mobsters together to the estate, or excuse me, America's mobsters. And by the way, Kentucky does have a famous mob history. This is covered in Sinister Forces in one of the volumes about the long-time mob connections of Kentucky. So it's not just Kansas City, right? Las Vegas, New York. It's not the only mob places. There's some interesting mob stories in Kentucky as well. And here's Goldfinger himself here with a mint julep here. Why, please, sir, might I have a bit of your mint julep? Now, Goldfinger's not a Southerner, obviously, but he does play golf, interestingly. I think he's at a Scottish golf club, and then he's in Kentucky at his Kentucky estate. So, let's see what else. As we said, 007 can turn a les. He turns pussy galore. How do they engage in this plot? Well, they spray chemtrails. Yes, the plot is that the Pussy Galore's airplane team of, I guess, lesbian pilots, they spray chemtrail nerve gas, which basically immediately causes the entire base at Fort Knox to pass out. This is how it goes down, and then Goldfinger has a regiment of basically Chinese communist soldiers who aid him along with his lesbians. So here we go. Who are the bad guys of the Cold War? The conglomeration of the commies and the Jews and the lesbians, according to Ian Fleming, right? And where's he going to go? Well, Goldfinger's going to retreat to Cuba once he destroys the gold, because Goldfinger, of course, is a commie, right? Now, this all sounds... this all fits the Cold War dialectic, right? Yeah. The commies work with the mobsters. But now, wait a minute. As we said, it's the Bank of England. And as a Rothschild entity, that's the real mafia. And they have the real plot going on here, don't they? Well, yes, they do. Of course they do. So if you pay attention, and they're the big mobsters who have the big money, Goldfinger is actually a small-time player, right? He's only got like, what do they say? He has like $16 million in gold or something. It's like he's not even a, 100 million. He's not even a billionaire. We have to be reminded, of course, that here's Lord Rothschild poking Prince Charles there, telling him what's going down, how it's going to be. If you can poke your finger in the chest of the prince, I would say you're running the show. $5 Skid Racket. When in December is Esoteric Hollywood 2 dropping? I don't know yet because I haven't been given a date. So that's all on the publishing and printing side now. So the book is at the printer. When exactly it drops, I have not been told yet. But as soon as I know, you will know. I promise. But thank you for that question there, Skid Racket. I was about to say Skid Mark. Skid Racket. Looking forward to your Twin Peaks Season 3 take. Thank you. I did complete that. Are you going to do more streams on Twitch for the Jay's Analysis Nerds? Yeah, I've just been too busy with, material like this. A Twitch stream is there for backup and for fun. They don't make any money. You know what I mean? So this was a job. So we got to, priority has to be the streams that make money. But I was enjoying Hitman. It was a fun game. Also very much propaganda as we were seeing. But I could easily get back into it. So anyway, fascinating stuff in Goldfinger there. Almost like we're being told that the real economy is assets, right? It's gold, right? The Bank of England has gold. Goldfinger wants gold. What does the goofus population want? Fiat currency that's not even based on gold after the shock doctrine. Now, of course, gold's not the only asset, but gold is a very powerful asset. Land, right? Jewels, anything like this is valuable, real assets. Fiat currency, as we know, is a big scam. Next, we move to Thunderball. And if you recall in Jay's analysis, or in Esoteric Hollywood, we did have some comments on Thunderball. By the way, Ian Fleming was hanging out with these people, in case you doubt me. He was hanging out with royals, elites, billionaires, Aristotle and Assis. Aristotle and Assis offered to pay for the first Bond movie. Okay, so he's hanging out with these people. Some people think Emilio Largo might be Aristotle and Assis, or he might have some connection to it. Which is an interesting thesis, right? This is kind of like gemstone file type thesis. Anyway. Now, Thunderball is what? Let's see. Let's move to Thunderball. 1965. Wow. Big hit. Cost $9 million, made 140 in 60s money. Also not as good as From Russia with Love. Goldfinger is probably a better movie. Thunderball's okay, but and I like Emilio Largo as a villain, but you've got this this long underwater fight scene, which is like, I don't know where they came up with. Hey, let's have a 20-minute fight scene in slow motion because it's underwater. Not the best idea in my mind, but still a fun movie, still worth watching. A lot of interesting elements here. Bond stages his death. So we see that staged deaths do occur. This is part of the espionage world. We have, in the plot of Spectre this time, body doubles. Body doubles are real. We know that Saddam had body doubles. We know that Bin Laden had body doubles. These are all real world espionage tricks. See some of the different fake Bin Ladens that we saw over the years. There was the fat Bin Laden, right? The normal skinny Bin Laden. These are different images that the so-called media told us was the evil international terror villain. Yeah, the Bin Laden body double looks like Maharishi Mahesh Yogi or something. It's laughable. And then there is, of course, the movie, the Saddam movie about the body doubles. Devil's Double, right? Yeah, the Devil's Double movie with Saddam's doubles. So this does occur. It has happened in the world of espionage, but now that doesn't mean that we run crazy with it and we do transvestigations and we think that everybody's a transvestite, or everybody has a body double and everything's faked and staged. That's retarded. Zach Fisher, $4.99. Did the Rothschilds have an army? It's called Interpol. Interpol arose as Rothschild's police intelligence network. The Crown should have been able to seize the assets if they manned them militarily, right? Well, they were able to basically take over the Bank of England a long time ago. So, no, if you own the bank and can crash the economy, your armies will do you no good. If I'm holding your economy hostage by threatening your whole country, you're not gonna arrest me, bro. And look into the the whole history of the Rothschilds and the Bank of England, right? We cover this in the Quigley lectures. Go listen to the Quigley talks. But thank you for that question there. Let's see what it was. Associated Press? Yeah, Associated Press, Interpol. These were started by the Rothschilds. So, did they have an army? Not an army, but they had spies and intelligence network. Every big dynasty has spies and an intelligence network. That's part of running a giant empire. So that staged death of 007 is interesting from that angle. Now in France, we learn that are we on Thunderball? Yeah. Emilio Largo is part of Spectre, and Spectre has fronts everywhere. And when Largo goes to one of the front operations of Spectre in France, it's called the International Brotherhood for the Helping of Stateless Persons. You can't make this up. In other words, refugee relocation program. Right? Does this sound familiar? The International Brotherhood. Okay, so it's like a Masonic society for relocating refugees. Where have we heard this before? Well, it's the perfect front. And when Emilio Largo enters the facility, while he steps back into the secret auditorium, and there is the Spectre meeting. And this is essentially a Bilderberg meeting. Spectre is going over their drug sales, their black market production, and their plot against NATO. Now, wait a minute. NATO and the CIA and Bilderberg and Bohemian Grove, all part of the same power structure. That's the real Spectre. It's not the opponents of NATO, but in the movie, Spectre is the enemy of NATO, and they're going to hold NATO ransom for $100 million or something. One of their operatives is Count Lippe. Count Lippe, as we said, is connected to the Tong mafia organization. So the Tongs have come up twice, and the idea here is that the International Terror Organization works with the mobsters. So the secret society, of course, is connected to the mafia. The mafia is a secret society, and the Tongs are a secret society. We saw this a minute ago. So again, look at how much is there if you pay attention and you knew what was going on. You know, in like geopolitics, you would be figuring out like, holy crap, dude, this is how the real world works. Now, again, we have another nuke tale through an elaborate body double plot. Spectre has stolen a nuke. The nuke is spirited away to the Keys, where the Bahamas, where Emilio Largo has his private island. This is why I think some people have speculated that this might stand for Aristotle Onassis or something like that, right? He has his private island, Scorpios. In the James Bond role-playing game from the 80s, the evil organization is called Scorpios. Well, they're located on Scorpios. Scorpios was Aristotle Onassis' private island. So anyway, I don't know if that's true. It's a loose association between possible inspirations for Emilio Largo. Who knows? But if you read the Gemstone Files, which has some interesting connections in terms of JFK and all that, you will get some of these theories put forth. I don't know if it's true, but certainly it's true that Ian Fleming was running in all these circles, so he probably did know what was going down. While all of this espionage is going on and Bond is foiling the plot of Emilio Largo and Spectre, there's a weird indigenous voodoo parade going on. And there's a scene where this is called Junkaroo. Okay, I've never heard of this, but this is a real thing in the Keys and in the Bahamas. And it's a old-time indigenous voodoo Yoruba type parade, and it takes place sometime in December, I think. Now, what's weird about it is that in the midst of this parade, they show Chase Bank in one scene, and the parade with a giant United Nations float, or like a guy wearing like a giant United Nations suit. It's very bizarre, right in front of Chase Bank. Wow, interesting scenery there. Why are we seeing that? Well, yeah, Chase Bank is in the background of the UN because Chase Bank is David Rockefeller's bank. Chase Bank was the first bank set up in communist China because David Rockefeller loves communist China. How many times have we talked about that? So Bond, as we saw, was an agent of the Bank of England, which is allied to Chase Bank. Rothschilds and the Rockefellers are allies. They combined their houses recently, the last few years. Of course, they were already pretty much on the same team anyway. They just did it publicly. Let's make sure that we see that so that people don't think we are making up crazed conspiracies, crazy tinfoil hat conspiracies. You're insane. Where did you get that? Now, all right, now this was in mainstream news. Let's see, let me type in combine, yeah, Rothschild and Rockefeller combine, that'll come up. And yes, ha, it's even in Forbes. Daily Mail one was better though, because it was like the Daily Mail headline for this from 2000. Shit, when was this? 12? Well, I don't know. Here's the Business Insider headline. And Business Insider doesn't have a problem, you know, mentioning that it's conspiratorial. There's Forbes. Here's Business Insider. Dynastic wealth merges as Rockefeller and Rothschild families unite. Let the conspiracies begin. Now, they already were, right? J.P. Morgan was already a Rothschild thing. J.P. Morgan Chase Manhattan. It's already united. Okay, but for all intents and purposes, you know, we can make it public now. And that's because the Federal Reserve is a cartel of 8 families. Yes, exactly. So it's not like they weren't united before. Oh, they're fighting one another, competing. No, they're not. They all have the exact same goals and plans. That's why David Rockefeller loves communism, just like the Rothschilds have loved communism. So nukes. Got to have the nuke fear. Can't have Cold War stuff without all the nuke fear. That's a big part of this, and this is, you know, stolen nukes, blah, blah. How many times have we heard stolen nuke stories? Endless stolen nuke stories. So, but I want to stress that what's interesting here is that, again, Spectre is presented as the enemy of NATO, an international terror organization with fronts based around charities and NGOs. Hello, it's right here in the movie, that run international crime syndicates. Well, yeah, that's not Russians. That's not KGB. That's not amorphous rogue terrorists. No, they're run by the same people. And it's all true. If you read Quigley, you'll see that this article here at Global Research, yes, exactly. That's what Quigley says. Anglo-American establishment is the Rothschild establishment. And it's all true. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy fact. So, there you go. All laid out in fascinating fashion in the first 4 Bond movies. Did we do all 4? Yeah, we did Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball. Now, I'm not going to just rehash what's in David Wim Hof's book. That would not be appropriate or right. We're going to do an analysis of the interplay of the first chunk of what Wim Hof talks about with what we see in Quigley, with what we've seen in other globalist books that we've done many of now, 15, 16, 20, I've already lost count. We're going to see the interplay. We're going to look at, because he's talking about the Roman Catholic Church and how the Catholic Church was duped into the Cold War. And a big part of that is, again, Hollywood. If you get Esoteric Hollywood 2, you're going to see my chapters on the Roman Catholic Church being used in the Cold War. And that's essentially the thesis of Wim Hof's book, is the doctrinal warfare program of the CIA to promote and get the Cold War going through Time Life magazine, which was Henry Luce, Skull and Bones, WASP elite, getting the Cold War going for the neocon power structure. So we're going to delve into that in the second half. But the second half, of course, is for subscribers. I will be talking about Alex Abeo's book, Soldiers of Reason, as well. We're going to talk about Fire in the Minds of Men. We're going to tie all that research in to Cold War secrets. Cold War secrets. So thank you guys for listening. If you want to hear the full talk, you can subscribe at the purchase membership section at Jay's Analysis. And there will also, again, part 2 will not be up tonight. It takes a while to do these. And then it takes a while to process. So part 2 most likely will be up tomorrow. I don't think I have any other shows or podcasts to do tomorrow, so it should be pretty easy to have the second half for subscribers up tomorrow and to have it sent out by tomorrow night. So if there's not any more super chats, I'll give you guys a few minutes here. We're going to get a drink, and if any more super chats come in, we'll continue the talk. Let me use the potty, and we'll see what you guys come up with. Music. Dyer, Jay's Analysis. Dyer, Jay's Analysis. All right. Need a drink of water. I don't see any more super chats, so thank you guys. I'm sorry I didn't know it was that loud. I'm not used to playing the music clips in OBS, so I didn't know it was that loud. Who is this? I don't know. It's me. It's Amid the Ruins. It's a guy who makes Dyer wave music. So anyway, I hope you guys like. You can just look up Amid the Ruins and the Dyer wave. All right, so thank you guys. That was a fun little talk there. And look for the rest of the Cold War Secrets talk tomorrow. Have a good night and God bless.